Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we have some playa props here for you guys in these 9 versus 10 matchups in the NBA on Wednesday night here. Also had a couple videos up for you guys about those Tuesday night games, and we'll continue to have them. So make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along. We also want you to head to thelines.com. That's where we're putting up all these great picks for you guys up on the site these days as well. And you can use our odds finder tool. That's where you can make sure you're getting the best odds available to you from all of the books that are giving us bets this NBA postseason. Nate, let's jump right into your first NBA playa prop for tonight.
Yeah, it's Nikola Vucevic in this Bulls-Raptors game, and it's nothing crazy. I mean, his props are very reasonably low. 18 points, minus 106. I like 11 rebounds, I think even more. It's plus 102 at FanDuel. Plus odds, I wouldn't mind taking an alternate line to get even better plus odds. I think he will get 12 or more boards. His last 10 against Toronto, averaging 12 and a half boards and 20 points per game on 53% field goal shooting. So Toronto's not a team that's historically stopped centers, even when they had Marc Gasol there for a while. And now they have Poeltl. And look, Poeltl has not stopped Vooch either. Vooch has averaged 20 and a half points per game on 55% field goal shooting his last 7 against the man, mostly when he was with the Spurs. He's actually scored even more in Toronto, 22 points per game, including the last time out. He had a 30% usage rate in a low scoring game, a game with only 71 field goal attempts for the Bulls. DeRozan and Levine both had cold nights. I mean, didn't really get many shots off, because that's the thing with the Raptors scares you, is they're really good perimeter defense, right? They hound people. They force the most turnovers in the league. They limit paint points. They limit free throws. But this is not Nikola Vucevic's game. That's exactly why I'm not surprised to see him get steady points in the mid-range with those little hooks. He's not trying to be physical. He's not trying to mix it up in there. He's just trying to, play his finesse game. He's one of the best finesse centers out there. Toronto giving up the 8th most points to centers in their last 30 here. And look at Vooch in the playoffs. His last 10 playoff games have all been against Milwaukee, because poor Vooch, either with Orlando or Chicago. So he's matching up against Brolo, Defensive Player of the Year finalist, and the Bucks. And in those 10 games, still averaged 24 a game, about 12 rebounds, with a 27% usage rate. So I'm not worried about Poeltl or the Raptors defense here. I think the Bulls will play through him a lot, and I think he's going to grab at least 12 boards in a game that should have a lot of misses with this low total of 214.
Yeah, I like all of that, because I also kind of like unders for Poeltl, to be honest. I think he does also tend to get, at least last time, he seemed to get worked off the floor a bit when the Bulls were going a bit smaller. But even when Vooch is out there, like you said, Vooch has kind of dominated him and limited him in the rebound category as well. For him to get 10 boards tonight, I don't think it's quite as likely. I would take actually the under on that if you can get some pretty good odds on it. The no to a double-double is also a decent odds for Poeltl there. If you follow along with the theory that Vooch is going to have a pretty good game against him, I think it's going to be all over the place, especially as the Bulls have become one of the better rebounding teams defensively and otherwise in the league over the last month or 2 of the season. Well, really 3 months of the season. So I concur with what you're saying there. And I would move on to Josh Giddey, who I kind of need to fade once again against this Pellies team. And it's in part because, this year he's been pretty dominated by them, especially in the assist category, which is where you're getting most of the juice if you want it. For him to get under 6 assists, it's definitely dicey, but for him to do so is plus 112 on FanDuel. The points, rebounds, and assists are probably a little safer. Still really good juice there. For him to go under 32 and a half is minus 108 also on FanDuel. In 4 games versus the Pellies this season, he is averaging 15 points. He is not averaging very many assists at 3.8, and that's in 32 minutes per game, which is a surprisingly low number for Giddey, who has sort of toned down the assists a bit this season, as he has also upped his scoring a bit as well. That's where he's getting a bit more, but against New Orleans, just not getting it done in that sense. He's not really playing in that point guard position, which is where the Pellies seem to be giving up a bit more of their points. That's kind of why I actually like SGA a bit more in the points category. Still don't really like Giddey to be able to get his assists or really all of his stats there. New Orleans is limiting the 4th fewest assists per game in their last 15, and on the season they're allowing the 6th fewest. And in Oklahoma, in New Orleans this season for Giddey, 5 assists in those 2 games, averaging just 2.5 assists in that situation. Hasn't hit this prop versus New Orleans in any of the last 5 times that these teams have played either of those props. I should mention. Well, I'm sorry, he hit 6 assists once in their last 5 games. The points, rebounds, and assists he has not hit in all 6 of the last 6 times that they've faced each other. And in his career in total versus this team, he's only averaging 13 a game. He does have about 8.5 boards. And still slightly fewer than 6 assists once again in all of the times that he's played them, which has now been up to about 9 or 10 games in his career. And in the last, if you just sort of rattling off some of the stuff that you were talking about with the Pellies last season, or excuse me, in the other video where we're talking about the Pellies and liking their defense and liking their intensity to come out, especially early. There's just going to be a slower pace expected when you're playing in New Orleans in that style for them, especially when they do have BI and they're relying on Ingram to go up with about a 36% usage rate. That slows the game down as he plays a bit more in that mid-range play and needs to get to his spots, etc. So I think there will be a few less opportunities in general for Giddey in this situation, especially when I'm about to talk about the usage rate that SGA is probably going to have.
Yeah, I only trust SGA for the Thunder right now, which is why I think that dovetails nicely into the second pick we'll get to in a minute. But for Giddey, I'm too risk adverse to take the under 5.5 assists personally. I know that the odds are good, but I would rather lump together 32.5 PRA. I think he'll come up short in the scoring department. You don't get good odds on under 18.5 points, but I think he'll come up short at least in one of these 3 categories and just like come up with like 30, 31 PRA if he has a pretty good game. I think that's his ceiling. That's why I think you're correct to point out he hasn't hit this in 6 straight against the Pelicans, exactly the type of team that can limit him. So stay with me here. This is a creative one using the DraftKings head-to-head props, which is fun here for the playoffs and a nice way to look at some exploitable opportunities. I'm looking at DeMar DeRozan and Pascal Siakam. So you see their head-to-head props, like who's going to score more, or you can just take their combined props. And their total is 15.5 field goals together. I like over there. It's minus 120, but it seems incredibly likely. I mean, DeRozan, he hasn't been the same guy. Sure. I mean, he struggled in 3 straight against Toronto, only getting 14 field goals in those 3. And he's struggled a little bit down the stretch this season. I don't know if it's legs or what it is, but only 7 field goals per game and 19 points per game his last 9 road games. But look, that's still going to get you to this prop because Pascal at home since the start of February averages 10 field goals a game. So you're at 17 even if these guys are hitting their averages. And these are the number 1A. I mean, maybe DeRozan is 1B if Levine has it cooking. But they're top options on their team when it gets down to like pure half court. Who's going to run a set? Who's going to get you a shot? Who's going to score, from the field, especially too. I mean, Siakam tries to get to the line. DeRozan, that's not even really his game at all. He's just the mid-range maestro. So it is going to be whether he hits his shots or not. And I'm willing to trust the proven playoff performer. Averaged 21 a game, took nearly 20 free field goals again in that series against the Bucks last year when he in his first playoff outing with the Bulls played 41 minutes. So he's not coming off the floor, even if he's not hitting. He should be rested up a little bit after sitting that last game. And Siakam averaging 26.5 a game at home since February. His field goal percentage is way up at home. He just is that guy who feeds at home on he has pretty good numbers against the Bulls when he is home. So I think combine these 2 guys, they'll get you 16 field goals.
Yeah, no, I like it, and I love the head-to-head stuff too that we're finding when you can either take them to combine, you can get a spread between who's going to score more or less, and I think there's some pretty interesting stuff there when you kind of consider you get to narrow it down a bit more to who you think is going to be successful rather than having to worry about the entire team, obviously, and just sheer volume comes into play here. Who's going to have the ball in their hands with the usage, etc. And so I think the problem is that Chicago-Toronto game is the most annoying one to have to figure out who's going to do what. But in this situation, to what you're speaking about, if you wanted to do this type of bet with either DeRozan or Levine with Siakam in this one, I'd feel good. But I do think you can rely on Siakam to be the more reliable, the most reliable of the options, especially down the stretch, the way that he sort of took over as clear option 1A in Toronto, where that wasn't necessarily the case last year. And there were a few more options that were definitely crowding in on him. So, but let's stick to that type of bet here, Nate, and let me just finish it off. It feels a little bit fishy, but all of the numbers are leaning towards like SGA's got to just continue to score. Once again, we can rely on usage rate, and that's why I'm picking him to be the leading scorer, which is a head-to-head with one of the sort of player props that you can get there on DraftKings. And then I'm also going to look at that head-to-head with him and Brandon Ingram, because he is -1.5 over BI, meaning he would need to score 2 more points than Brandon Ingram to win this bet. And you get that at -120 at DK. So neither of them are my favorite in terms of juice, but I do like putting a unit or two on both of them, to be honest, just because I like SGA to score. If you do like there to be slightly fewer points in this game, like we're kind of predicting the Pelly's defense to come through a bit more in this game and lead the sort of the way that this game is played, then you don't necessarily feel as good about 33 points for SGA as his prop, even though that's about his average against the Pelly's on the road this season. He's averaging about 35 points and then 31 points in the 2 games he's played in NOLA this season. And BI has had a good game when he played against the Pellies, or against the Thunder, which was just once this season, but he did put up 34 points in that game. So I think the biggest thing I'm looking at here for the Thunder and the difference between SGA scoring and BI scoring is SGA is going to continue to get his from the free throw line. That is one place that the Pellies will give up a bunch of stats, is free throw attempts. And he's averaged 15 free throw attempts in the 2 games he's played in NOLA this season, making 14 of them, because that's how he's gotten the majority of his points this year, averaging at least 9 free throw attempts in most of the games he's playing. And yeah, that's where, like I said, New Orleans has given up the 10th most free throw attempts the 8th most over the course of the season and in the last 15. And they're also allowing the most points to point guards of any of the other positions, right? They're 10th most points to point guards over their last 15 games. And that is the position where they allow the most points on the floor. So I think for BI, he had a great game, but that usage rate for SGA is going to be at close to 40%. Like it's at 35.5% against this team on the season. And then it's at 39% when he's played on the road against the Pellies. Like I said, damn near 40. And this is a game where I think that they know, like, that's kind of the New Orleans style of play against this team is Shea's going to be allowed to shoot. He's going to be allowed to have the ball in his hands, and they're going to take everything else away as much as they can, as a few other guys, including Giddey, who I talked about already, have struggled to get points and or assists or stats of any kind against this team, because they're really letting Shea get his to that degree and then just pretty much shutting it down everything else. And I think we can rely on that once again.
Yeah, exactly. It's what I said to your first pick is he's the only person I trust on OKC, even though he doesn't really have any playoff experience either. He's been in this mode all year where it's just like, all right, I'm going to go out and carry us and keep us in this one, or actually win it when we're underdogs. And it's a familiar role. Giddey and Jalen Williams being his sidekicks means extremely high usage, because those guys are essentially rookies. I mean, Giddey is the second year and just star, big lights here in terms of the playing game, and just tougher matchups for them as well. SGA will get Herb Jones a lot. We'll see how he handles that, but I think he'll be able to exploit some switches. I talked about him getting Joe Val off the floor with that pick and roll game and just getting to the free throw line. Like you said, down the stretch, I think that's what we'll see a lot here as we get into playoff atmosphere, and that's what he will get to hang his hat on scoring wise.
Yeah, he's going to start paying some rent there at the free throw line before long, I would imagine. So that is all the time we have for you in this one, though. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. We're going to be coming back to you guys. We're going to preview the entire playoffs. Want to make that clear as well. So we'll have that video up for you guys, looking at some of these series prices that we now have available to us. We'll also be looking at those Friday night games to find out who will be the 8th seed in each conference. So until we see you next, happy betting.